Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Town of Superior Board of Trustees for March 9th, 2009. And Phyllis, if you could call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Andrew Muckle.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli.
Here.
Dana D'Souza.
Here.
Elia Gagoras.
Present.
Eric Rosenfeld. Deborah Williams.
Here.
Town Manager Scott Williams. Scott Williams. I'm sorry, Scott Randall.
What's your name again? Whoa. My disease is catching.
Well, I just said Williams just before that.
Bruce
Deb
Randall.
Williams. We have Deb Williams.
He's here.
Scott Williams.
Thank you. Town Attorney Kendra Carberry. Here. Town Clerk Sergeant here.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda, Trustee Skumatz?
I would like to pull several items, D, F, G, and I. And I also have a small comment to make on the minutes, but I don't think I need to pull it for that.
No. Okay. All right, so D, F, G, and I to follow the consent agenda. Any other changes to tonight's agenda? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with that change by Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee Sorelli. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items.
Hi, Steve Smith, 653 Eden Circle. I'm here on behalf of the HOA this evening. And I'll just make this quick on item 6E you'll be discussing this evening. We went ahead and signed the contract with the HOA, but we have a request, and that is that you review the usage of the banner over the road to announce our events. We had discussed this in the past, and for whatever reason that didn't work out. We would ask you to review that again as part of the contract. We would be willing to pay to have the fire department put the banner up if necessary. But our request is, what we think is a very reasonable request, is to ask to be able to advertise those events for several reasons. Number one, the town doesn't participate monetarily like they used to. You don't have to provide the facilities like you used to because of the restrooms now are built. In addition to that, there's no staff provided to any of these events, so there's not a monetary cost to the town for these events anymore. In addition to that, since I've been on the HOA, we've opened those events up to the whole community. So they're no longer just Rock Creek events, with the exception of one single event that we've kept Rock Creek. The rest of them are open to the whole community, including the movie nights and everything else. We feel this participation from the town to allow us to advertise it on the banner will increase the number of people coming to these events and just increase the overall well-being of our community. And I think it would be a good step towards the future of the HOA and the town and everybody playing nicely together. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Trustee D'Souza.
Can you just refresh us how we did that last year with this? We had certain number of events that were put up by the banner, or
No,
what
the
did-
banner didn't go.
They didn't go at all. but-
Never went.
The concept was that this agreement would cover it, but that we would discuss, or that it would mention which events they wanted the banner for. So I guess some kind of schedule is what maybe is what I'm thinking might be added to the agreement if we were agreeable to doing this, so that we knew in advance when and which events the banner was expected.
And then we could react to that.
Right, because if they coincide with other events in town,
Well, it's an arrangement with the fire
Right.
department to do it up and everything.
I'm just saying that there might be other circumstances. And you're asking for all of the HOA events.
Well, of course, we'd ask for everything, get what we got.
That's what I'm just checking, so.
So-
Trustee Schoenhouse, did you have anything else?
I was just going to suggest that they can make a request and we can figure
That's
out
what-
once it makes sense.
Right, and I thought that that was going to be part of this contract for this year. So it, for whatever reason, it's not part of this. Why don't you send us a schedule of the things that you'd like, and then we can think about it at the next board meeting.
Very good.
Should be
Thank you for
plenty
your
of time for that.
consideration.
Okay.
I had a comment
Welcome,
about
George.
that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at the, what about this eventually at some point? Because this wouldn't,
That's why we were doing
why we're
that.
If-
This is not alone. We get a dozen requests a year. Most recently, it's been the Monarch Baseball Group that's been wanting us to, and the answer is the same, no. And this was one of the responses, so that we can provide this access to.
I mean, you wouldn't have to bother the fire department in one
Yeah.
sense, and you could have this
Yes.
running morning, noon, and night, in essence, and
So-
But we have to
communicate.
decide whether we're going to get it,
Get it,
when, how
right.
quickly it's going to go in. Are we going to spend the money necessary to get it done? It probably is not an answer for certainly the first half of this year.
The Easter egg hunt wouldn't make it.
So anyway, the special consideration we're asking for is we're not the Little League. We are in
Right.
conjunction with the whole town.
You're
It
the
is a
big
whole
league.
town event, but we're the big league.
We're the major league, yes.
It's, the idea is that we're more in a partnership with the town, and this is something we're offering to the whole town. It's not just a particular fundraising event or whatever. So we see it in a little bit different light than Scott does.
Okay, thanks.
And, I think on the HOAs we have, we're spending significant amounts of money for these events too, so.
Okay. Welcome, George.
George Kuffner, 109 South Fork. I have a question for either the mayor or the town manager or town attorney or anyone else who wish to give me some answers, please. On the consent agenda tonight, L is adopting a resolution approving final plat for the Guardian Storage. Don't you think that this should be pulled off and voted on individually since it's an annexation agreement? It's
So-
final approval?
This is something that the Planning Commission, this is available for, the town attorney can correct me, as she has in the past, but is available for the town board to pull up, and it's been reviewed by the Planning Commission, and so we could hold a public hearing if needed, but if it could remain on the consent agenda if we didn't have any questions. So,
That's pursuant to the code, you're right.
got one thing right tonight.
Don't need to be pulled off separately? Because there was quite a concern about that, and it was a close vote here the night that you voted the second go-around. I think that should be revoted. Really, I do. It's important issues. There's some other issues on this agenda that you are passing here that you're spending money, which I know should be pulled off and voted individually. This landscaping, G, F,
Both of those have been, both of those have been
They
pulled.
have been pulled.
huh?
Those have been pulled.
Okay. We'll forget that. As long as we're full, we can discuss it then.
But that doesn't have to do with the fact that we're spending money.
It is,
We
you
still
are
can
spending
spend
money
money
on
on a consent agenda.
Right.
And I've heard you say several times.
Yeah, we spend money on the consent agenda on a regular basis. We just have to have a roll call vote if we do that.
Well, I know you asked for that the whole time. That's what I'm asking. Second, I want to know a little bit about town attorney's performance rating. Has it been released yet? I have heard nothing about this yet. Has it been completed
Performance rating.
for the town manager? His annual
Manager or the
review.
attorney?
The manager, the attorney.
Which one is it? So,
Mr. Randall, okay?
Oh,
Well, you first said attorney, so that
Town
was the
manager.
board didn't understand.
And his review is up in...
Kendra, you're off the hook.
In March. I think he was hired in February.
yes, it's
If you
ongoing.
went through this, so people, have you made
It's
this
ongoing.
review?
It's ongoing at the moment.
It's ongoing, that's okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay?
I haven't heard nothing about it. In 1907, we spent thousands of dollars on this town center over here, and all we, you know what I'm talking about. when Jeff
1907. You have
Chu-
to correct. 1907?
2007.
I'm guessing
2007. Okay, all right,
Excuse
just-
me,
okay.
if I made a mistake. We spent thousands of dollars on this, and we haven't had no updates of what's coming off of that. I haven't heard anything. Mr. Chu and Karen were pushing that pretty hard in 7. We had meetings continually on something about it, and there's nothing been come up about it here lately to let the general public know about it. Would you please see that we could? I wanted to ask, I asked you a question a while back, and I ain't got an answer yet. I want to know how much the sales tax declined over here in the Superior Marketplace. No answer yet.
For what month are you talking about?
I'm talking about for the year, ending year, up to date, what we have, what the sales tax is decreased or is increased or whatever. Could we get an answer on that?
I think that's public
I think that
knowledge.
was published already.
I don't see that.
Individual businesses are not. The town sales tax last year was up 0.75%, roughly, don't hold me to an exact, but roughly $90,000 above where it was the year before. So in response to your question, zero. There was no decline in 2008 over 2007. That's townwide. That's not the marketplace. And again, we're not at liberty to disclose individual sales tax generation
I'm
numbers.
talking about Superior Marketplace, sir, or any other. I know other towns have declined and they're tightening their belts.
Yes.
I'm just concerned about our belt,
It
and
is,
that's why I'm asking the
it is
question.
on our radar screen, yes. We're concerned about that as well.
Okay. The next other question I really would like to know would be, your meeting the 16th, does that include the south end of town, fiasco about the street down there being paved now? Since paved, it's still only 23 feet wide, Mayor. Is that on the list for the 16th?
And you're speaking about the asphalt paving program? I don't
Correct.
have the agenda in
Well, the
front of me.
street, the whole project down on the south end. I have some questions pertaining to that.
Okay,
And is that going to be on the agenda
So-
the 16th?
work session, but
She, Lisa has asked for it, and I think there's someone else asked for it.
I suspect we'll talk
After
We're
about
having a
it
work session.
So
Yeah,
we
there's a
can
work
discuss
session.
that at that
On the,
meeting?
on the
Okay.
global,
Right.
on a global matter.
Global,
Yeah.
and individual things will likely come up too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's answered my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. No? Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Welcome.
Sandy Pennington, 3002 Micah Court. I would put this out to both the board and to Scott. I would like a recap of any meetings or discussions or any contact of any kind between the three parties of the proposed swap, BVSD, Richmond, Town of Superior, since the February 9th meeting.
So we're waiting, where we're at with that is that we're waiting for Richmond to see if they're interested in coming forward. That's where we're at.
My request was for any recap of meetings or discussions with them. If I can I have a recap of any discussions that have been had?
The board hasn't had any.
Should that be public record?
The-
How about Scott?
That's between the manager. I don't even know if he's had any discussions or anything you want to
I
talk
met with the
about.
director of planning on VVSD on the ski slope yesterday.
Can I assume then that means that since February 9th, you have not had any phone conversations or discussions?
No, I wouldn't go so far as to say that.
Okay.
If you've got a request for information, feel free to fill it out with Phyllis, and we'll respond to your request for FOI. Do I know what my calendar has been since February 9th? No.
Can you give me the essence of any conversation?
No,
In terms of
there's a
in terms of
process for you to fill
town
out
business,
and ask what you
yeah.
want.
Town business that happens at the town board here, and the town board has not had any action or any contact with Richmond.
Okay, so the process, as I'm hearing it, for me to understand what discussions have been had by the town manager, I've got to fill out an FOI app.
I would say that that's probably accurate. I'd have to defer to the town attorney if there is any information to. That's
Yeah, the Open Records Act requires us to produce documents in response to requests. To the extent there's been any correspondence, anything like that that's not privileged and is allowed to be disclosed, if you did an open records request, you would get copies of those documents.
For the record, we homeowners in this town feel like there have been backroom discussions on this that we've not been privy to. And so the interest here is to make those part of the public record and to include homeowners in those discussions.
okay. So once again, the town decisions happen at the town board level. The town board has not had any discussions with Richmond, and we're waiting to see if Richmond is interested in coming forward. That's where the process is.
Do you have any idea of the time frame in which they will come forward?
I have no idea. That's in their court. It'd be better to chat with them, I guess, about
Okay.
it.
I would, as a last request, we received the Town of Superior newsletter. On the inside front cover, Mayor Muckle, you put forth sort of a placating tone that, relax, this is a preliminary, very preliminary thing. On page 4, Mr. Randall stated, after months of negotiations, we have reached an agreement in principle. And in tonight's planning document, it said, it listed objectives to complete this acquisition, to complete this swap. There seem to be great differences in tone here, and I'd like clarity on which tone is accurate. Where are we on this deal?
Once again, we've had a preliminary discussion with Richmond. It's in their court to decide whether or not they're interested in coming forward, and the town board has not heard anything from them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Okay. With that, let's move to item number 5, presentations. And tonight we have the great privilege to have our state senator, Mr. Gibbs, with us. So I'd like a brief introduction, if I could, for you, which is Senator is currently our state senator representing the 16th district, which includes significant portions of the Front Range as well as many mountain communities. Senator is a Democrat, has been our senator since, I believe, appointed to fill this slot by Senator Fitzgerald in 2008. We appreciate his hard work on many parts of the state business. The FASTR bill, I think, has been an area where you've had great success, and we appreciate that. And I believe you're also on the Agricultural and Natural Services Committee.
Yeah.
So with that, welcome.
Great.
Thanks for coming. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and feel really lucky to be your state senator. I just love the town of Superior, and I was actually just looking online at your website earlier today to look at some of the history of the town, and it's just amazing to see some of the old mining activities that were within this area. Because my district, I'm from Summit County, so I'm used to mining communities, to say the least, but I have Summit County, Grand, Gilpin, Clear Creek, Western Jefferson County, and Western Boulder County. So I don't have Louisville, so US 36 is more or less one of my northern boundaries. But then heading towards Boulder, Marshall Road is one of my other boundaries, and I kind of go around the Flatirons and head up to Lyons. So, and then part of Rocky Mountain National Park, and so it's a tremendous area. I have 9 ski resorts in the district, and transportation and it's very important, whether it's this corridor 36 or I-70. I'm really kind of in the middle of a lot of the transportation discussions at a state level right now. So yeah, I'm the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and I'm also on the Agriculture, Livestock, and Natural Resources Committee. So, but I'm also involved with quite a few other issues and topics. Number one is I'm on the Governor's Forest Health Advisory Council. I'm a wildland firefighter when I'm not down at the Capitol, and I was actually up in the old stage fire in Boulder County. Seems like yesterday, but I guess it was a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And so looking at fire preparedness has definitely been a major priority, because whether or not you live in an area that's heavily forested and dealing with 2 million acres of dead lodgepole pine, or if you're more in the Front Range or foothills communities looking at some grass fire potential, I think Colorado is primed to have a difficult situation come summertime. I think we were very fortunate last summer that we didn't have the major fires that I was personally expecting. But so anyways, I just wanted to I do my best to get around the district as much as possible, even during the legislative session, when at times last week, in fact, we were at the Capitol debating a bill until about 2:30 in the morning, believe it or not. Whether it's on the weekends or during the week, I try to meet with trustee members like yourselves, or town councils, county commissioners, you name it, to give brief updates, and but most importantly, hear from folks too on what issues you want me to look into. So, Mayor, you mentioned the FASTR bill. I was going to mention that briefly. FASTR stands for Funding Advancement for Surface Transportation Economic Recovery Act. It's really been a long time in the works in many ways, with the Governor's Blue Ribbon Panel on transportation funding. Many of the recommendations that came out of that Blue Ribbon Panel were put right into the bill, and really excited to get that through. Passed it right out of the Senate, and and over to the House. In the House, they had a few amendments that I was comfortable with, and we just had the bill signing, let's say, last week. So it's exciting to have that over with. Also working on quite a few different kind of wildfire-related bills that look at everything for state standards for developing community wildfire protection plans. Looking at who's in charge of a fire. Senate Bill 20 was a bill I introduced that puts in statute what current practices are in the state right now, and really updates some language too. So we know who's in charge of a fire, a wildland fire, when one does occur in a community. Also working on an exciting bill that promotes the Colorado film industry that could potentially bring in millions of dollars to the state economy within tourism funding. Tourism is our second leading economy, as many of you know, and I think film could really play a unique role in that. We're really competing with other western states where New Mexico has a very aggressive kind of tax incentive. I know the governor of New Mexico did spend a lot of time too in Hollywood, really trying to get Hollywood types over to New Mexico. But I think there's great potential and great opportunity for that. It's a tough budget year this year. We already cut over $600 million. We're expecting to cut, about $1 billion, just even within 09-010 potentially. And so it's a tough year, just like I know it's tough for the town as well. But I still think we're able to accomplish a lot this year, especially on the transportation front. So I was very excited to work on that proposal. I don't know if any of you have any particular questions for me. I hope this is the first of many times I visit you all. I've had quite a few different kind of community discussions over at, let's say it's called Super Joe's. Yeah. And so I try to move those locations around to different areas, and turnout has been pretty decent. But I try to be everywhere at all places if possible. But so one weekend I might be here, another weekend I might be having a town hall meeting in Grand Lake or Breckenridge or Evergreen. So, but do my best to travel around. I brought these legislative directories. I know some of you probably already have these. Has contact information for me as well as other legislators down at the Capitol. I also brought a stack of my business cards that have, of course, my email, but my cell phone number as well. So if there are any issues that come up that you hear about and you want to know what the heck is your state senator doing about this issue or that issue, please give me a call, and I'll do my best to get right back to you. And I encourage you all to come down to the Capitol as well. Unlike the federal level in Washington, D.C., where I had an opportunity a couple years ago to testify on a bill before Congress, down at the state Capitol, you don't need an invitation per se. You can just come down and testify on your thoughts, whether pro or con on a particular bill. So I know some of you have probably already done that, but come down, be a part of the process, and as well as the folks here listening as well, because it's exciting. So we're in the middle part of the legislative session, so we finish up in early May. So it's kind of full steam ahead right now.
Great.
So I don't know if there are any
Yeah, thanks
questions.
for all your
I
hard
know I
work.
only have like 5-10 minutes. So
No,
I just
you
wanna say
have all the
quick
time
hi.
that we need, so we
Yeah.
appreciate it. No, really, we appreciate you coming here. You're a busy guy, and we appreciate all your hard work at the state capitol. So, questions from the board, Trustee Cirilli?
I appreciate your accomplishment on the FASTR bill. That is impressive. Despite that, which is going to raise money for our infrastructure, is there anything being done about raising gasoline taxes for the dual purpose of raising additional funds and also for encouraging green vehicles, or is that just something that nobody's willing to take their political bite on?
Yeah, that's a great question. The FASTR bill is, in my opinion, really just the first step, and really what we need to have is a broad statewide discussion on how we fund transportation in the future, whether it's mass transit, rail, or bus services, or roads, or bridges, and so forth. And as you know, probably FASTR will bring in over $200 million, about $254 million. And the Blue Ribbon panel says we need at least the bare minimum $500 million to $1.5 billion. So this is just the baby steps along the way. So there have been some discussions on possibly putting a question to the voters. I haven't heard about for this year per se, but I think we need to have that. I really do, because This faster bill, this is just something that we could take care of right now, because I know you're very aware of Tabor, of course, and requires the vote of the people, and I think we do need to have a statewide discussion on this, and to see where the chips fall with that, if you will. And but the faster plan was the first step. I'm not expecting a question to the voters. Anything will come out this year, possibly next year. We have had some bills looking at electric vehicles. I mentioned before I'm the Senate Transportation Committee Chairman. I was very proud and honored to support that bill coming out of committee, and it did pass out of the Senate. It looks at some incentives for electric vehicles, really making it more friendly for the state, if you will, to allow that on our roadways. But it's just a start, and I'd love to sit down with you sometime to hear your thoughts on how we can move forward. But I'm a huge proponent of kind of multimodal approach, really taking care of our existing infrastructure and our 126 structurally deficient bridges, but really thinking outside the box to see how we can expand bus and rail, because I really think that's really part of the future. And when we look at the expected population boom in the state of Colorado, it's real, and we can't really, in my opinion, pave our way out of difficult transportation problems that we're going to face in Colorado. And you all know on 36, of course. I mean, this is exciting corridor, but a lot of people live and work in this region too. So,
Other questions from the board?
I just had a question, speaking of greener vehicles, about the NEVs legislation. What's the update on that one?
Yeah, well, that's a bill sponsored by Senator Gail Schwartz.
Right.
It passed out of the Senate Transportation Committee, went to the floor for second reading of debate, and it was interesting with some of the folks that were debating in opposition.
Really?
And their opposition, within my faster bill, I had a provision in there called mileage-based revenue, otherwise known as VMT, kind of, in my opinion, thinking outside the box, knowing that the gas tax that we have is very much regressive and it hasn't been tied to inflation, so we're having the same buying power that we had back in 1983, which is really puts us in a tough situation. So some folks had the argument to say, hey, the NEV vehicles, they're not going to be paying gasoline tax, so they're not buying into the system. So should we develop some type of a new type of VMT or miles, system for them alone? But it was fascinating because the folks that are most critical of kind of the VMT concept when I was introducing Faster were the folks that were really pushing to make sure that the electric vehicles were taxed in some way. So. I don't know. It's interesting that capital at times, but anyways, it passed out of the Senate and now it's up. I can't remember who the House sponsor is, but I anticipate that'll pass out of the House, and hopefully we'll have an exciting bill signing in the near future for that.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one question about education. Obviously times are tight at the Capitol, as they are in many places, but education, especially higher education, I think is an important business development, environmental. I mean, there's so many positive attributes to higher education. And they always, because of where they are in the mix, they always seem to get the biggest bite out of any budget allocation. Is there any thoughts about how to improve that situation?
We will have a bill before us actually tomorrow for second reading of debate that looks at putting Amendment 50 that some folks, the majority of Coloradans voted for, that look at gaming revenues and so forth and directing some of that towards our community colleges, at least. But now there's a discussion on the folks that also want some of that money for historic preservation, because that's also important tourism piece for many communities in the state of Colorado. So there's always a battle at the Capitol between higher ed and especially with transportation. And in my opinion, they're both obviously very important, and as well as K through 12 and early childhood and healthcare and you name it. But Amendment 50, I think that was positive in terms of bringing new revenues for a component of higher ed. But in terms of real new money for higher ed, this is not the year. Everyone's seeing cuts, and there was a rally at the west steps of the Capitol this year with about 100 students from around the state urging us to really be more proactive, to have the state play a more of an active role and not be 49th nationally in terms of what our commitment is for higher education. And I'm a huge supporter of higher education in K through 12, but we really have to be creative with that too. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I'd like money to rain from heaven. Short of that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Short of that, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
especially in this area with CU and all the important things that are in this area that are critical for our economy, for our jobs, especially with green energy, all those issues that are so important for our areas. Somehow coming up with a way to fund higher ed is, I think, critically important.
Well, one component of that, another bill that we're examining right now is getting rid of the 6% rule, the Officer-Guard-Bird provision that puts some limitations on funding, but it's really not necessarily limitations on funding per se, as it's when you're over the 6%, money's trickled towards transportation more or less in capital construction. And there are folks that want to get rid of that because during tough economic times, there's a really negative ratchet effect. So the state funds go from X amount and then it drops way down here, but then you're stuck down here. And so that really has a major impediment on higher ed and capital construction and transportation, really, because transportation kind of gets the trickle. It's not a consistent funding source. They get on average maybe $200 million, but it impacts higher ed heavily in capital construction and transportation. So if we all voted to get rid of that, I think that could really allow the state, if you will, to make higher ed maybe more of a priority, to be able to spend more money there.
One of the ways that I thought about dealing with this is actually taking the transportation completely out and fund that through a steady stream somehow, so that it wouldn't have to necessarily, it's an important issue, but you wouldn't have to compete with higher ed.
Yeah.
So, raising the gas tax or, some other reliable indexing the gas tax, whatever the strategy would be, but actually have that as an independent funding stream for that, so you didn't have to compete with these other important issues. So.
Right. And what I've heard from folks in the transportation world and businesses and communities, counties, and so forth is they want something reliable, consistent, and responsible, to tell you the truth. So whether that's within general fund or whether that's out, I think most folks would feel more secure if that was within general fund. But I think there are creative mechanisms out there that you could, with a RTA concept or something like that, or
Anything else from the board?
And I think I really echo your comments about higher ed. I think that's really critical. But speaking of 49th, I also wanted to commend you for coming up with an alternate funding source on SB 52 and using gaming revenues rather than the fact that we're about 49th in recycling in this U.S. as well, and that's pathetic, and next to Mississippi is a pretty bad place to be. So thanks for finding gaming revenues to support that grant matching for the universities.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's exciting. And I represent communities actually too, everywhere, as I mentioned, from Superior to Kremlin and Tabernash and so forth, Idaho Springs. But I have communities that don't have a system in place. People are dying for a way to recycle and not have to drive 3 hours to do that. And I think that's important for every Coloradan to be a part of solving problems.
Well, SB 52 would have taken away one of the few sources of funding for cities on recycling, so thank you for fixing that.
Mr. Rendell?
Wondering if you could give us a status as well as your position on Senate Bill 180, which pertains to collective bargaining for public safety employees.
Yeah. I knew you'd say something like that, really tough. But I'm sure you all are familiar with it. I'm sure you all took a position, opposition. I know CML and CCI did as well. I'm still looking at that. That was supposed to be an appropriations committee. I've heard it has a lot of problems. I'm not on appropriations committee, so if it fails in appropriations committee, I won't have an opportunity to vote on it. As I mentioned earlier, I am a firefighter, but I'm considered a volunteer firefighter, so I'm not part of IFF, the International Firefighters Union, or anything. There is a process in place right now for police departments and special district, fire departments and so forth to unionize. I'm not convinced that, as I've seen how the bill is written, that it's necessary, I guess, because there is a process that can already take place.
Certainly numerous cities that have charters have incorporated in their cities that have voluntarily recognized, but the mandate that says if you have more than two employees, they can unionize.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a vested interest in that one.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And, I don't know all of you all that well yet, but I promise we will get to know each other much more so. But my friends up in Breckenridge and Clear Creek County town council members and so forth from Georgetown and so forth, they're calling me up daily, harassing me, and they're good friends of mine.
You're going to pass out those cards?
Yeah. And then
Don't forget.
Phone number.
And then my firefighting friends too are doing the same. So I'm really looking at this very, very closely, and I don't know if I'll be given the opportunity to vote on it. So my answer is I haven't made up my mind yet.
Okay.
I will say that came up with Mike Penny. I'm on the CNL Executive Board, and it came up as quite a lively discussion. Yeah. Pretty decidedly, yeah.
As a firefighter, and you obviously have friends that are employed as firefighters, do you feel that they feel that there's a need to unionize?
It depends on who you talk to, of course. There is a process in place to do that. Some firefighter friends I have, feel very comfortable in their current situation. I don't know of any person in a community that doesn't value firefighters and police officers. I come from a family of, I happen to be a firefighter, but most of my family members are police officers. So, to answer your question, I know that there are communities that really want to make this happen. They want it as easy as possible to organize. And especially in the firefighting community, it's really very special in many ways to be a part of a larger group and not just be a firefighter, but be a part of a group that actually lobbies heavily on their behalf at the federal level and at the state level, and really, frankly, at the local level too. So mixed opinions, and some friends I have say, "Hey, we have it great. Why would we want anything else?" Town manager and mayors and folks really value our work, and but I've heard different opinions on that.
And
I'm not going to tell you what towns they're from. Yeah.
And do they all feel that they can, is there competition among towns? Can they move to different towns to, better their work positions?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So that's actually not an issue then?
Yeah, we're looking at pay, of course, and how many, hours. Sometimes there's 24, 48 cycles where you have on and off and so forth, and you know how it is. For your town employees might get paid a little differently from here, from Louisville maybe, or Boulder. So, but there are obviously opportunities to make those decisions right now for people. Yeah. So let me guess, you don't like the bill?
I am not for unions.
Yeah.
I think they squash business. I think they tend to breed mediocrity among workers. That's just my opinion. And I work for Boulder Valley School District, so there's plenty of unions around there. That's just my opinion.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm not a member of the International Firefighters Union, so I'm considered volunteer status.
I don't know if there's anything else from the board or anything else from the town manager. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience that, if you wouldn't mind taking some time. I don't know if
Yeah, I'd be happy to. As well, if there are not, I don't want to say if there are not any questions, some of you might have some, but I have a website, dangibbs.com, and I have an email newsletter where it's about every other week or so, email blasts to say, hey, this is what I'm working on, these are the bills that are going on in the Capitol. So I do that pretty much all year round, a little more often during legislative session. So feel free to sign up on that. And yeah, for the folks that are here too, I have a stack of business cards so if anyone wants to get a hold of me. And I firmly believe that I'm only as effective as I know what issues are most important for people locally. So this past summer, you have amazing park, and I love the movie night and everything, and the chili cook-off days, and really, I'm sure I got it wrong though. Was it the chili days or something?
Chili Fest.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Early days, Chili Fest.
But it's what a wonderful community. In the times I spent campaigning here, I really have a grassroots approach. I know some of you probably saw me at your doorstep, but really talking to people individually, and I feel like you get a good sense of the community, of course, through doing that. And it's not easy because my district is large geographically, but I work really hard to do that, and not just during campaign season, but really all year round. So, in those email newsletter stuff, you'll get a sense of where I'm at, walking door to door and stuff too. So.
Great.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
having me. I appreciate
And look forward to continued working together.
Definitely, and please call me and come down to the Capitol, and all the above. So, and maybe Scott, I'll give you this stuff.
That'd be great.
to give.
I'll make sure that everyone gets it.
This is kind of an update, some of the bills I'm working on the backside, and
And I think we have a link to your address, don't we, on the town website? I assume that we do. If we don't, we will, but I think we try to have a link.
Newsletter as well.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
great.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Appreciate it. All right. With that, let's move on to item number 6, which is the consent agenda. And remaining on the consent agenda is A, approval of the minutes for February 23rd, 2009 meeting. B, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission meeting. C, approval of the liquor license renewal and tastings permits for Superior Liquor Market. E, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with the Rock Creek Master Homeowners Association for the use of the town parks and recreation center. H, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with the Rock Creek Flyers for use of the North Recreation Center. J, adoption of a resolution appointing member to ProStack. K, adoption of a resolution approving the 3-mile plan. And L, adoption of a resolution approving the final plat regarding storage. With that, I'll entertain a motion by Trustee Skumatz. Is there a second? By Trustee D'Souza. All in favor? I think we're actually comments. Sure.
I have 2 comments. One relates to this, and then one is a leftover from some of the discussion. And the only thing I wanted to say was that when Ms. Pennington came up here, I saw from the look on her face she wasn't completely satisfied with the answer she got. But I do want to say that the Freedom of Information Act is really the only way we can go forward with this, because otherwise the whole meeting could be hamstrung with people asking random questions about all kinds of different things that the town manager may or may not have been part of, and all that sort of stuff. And so really that's a way to get organized answers to questions and full information to those document questions. And so I hope it wasn't your particular issue that's being picked on. It's a process that I think is really important to keep town moving forward. So it wasn't something that was meant to be at your issue or anything like that. I think it's really important, a really important process. Second thing I wanted to say was about the minutes. And what I was hoping was that in the second paragraph under public comment, that Mr. Kuffner was not talking about streaking and the street stripping, but rather street striping, and that we don't want any more streakers in town.
No stripping in the right of way. All right. Any further discussion about the consent agenda? Seeing none, Phyllis, I think we're spending money, are we? I think so, yeah.
Must be one.
I don't think you are anymore.
Not now
All
that we're
right.
in one,
Pulled
right?
them all off that
Pulled off the...
Everyone?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Well, all in favor then? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. With that, let's go to what was D, preliminary approval of ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Superior Municipal Code regarding administration and personnel. Trustee Skumatz, Trustee Cirilli.
I did, but I'll let Trustee Cirilli go first.
Okay, I'll try to get my comments out as cogently as I can. They're kind of just a little bit disorganized, but I'll start with Article 3. Where we talk about appointment of officers and employees. And we're appointing as officers the town clerk and the treasurer, and that's a division that used to be town clerk / treasurer. And then there's other officers appointed and duties discussed. When we talk about the town manager, well, I guess the question I have with respect to the treasurer and the town clerk is that subsequently then there's a discussion of employees, and the town manager is responsible for employees, but the question is the treasurer and the town clerk, are they considered employees, or are they considered officers of the town?
Officers.
So who determines what they're paid, and
I'm responsible for their daily supervision. I'm responsible for establishing their performance standards as well as their levels of compensation, though they are appointed by you.
okay.
Just along this level of questioning, so who's going to be the town treasurer?
Whoever the board decides. In the past, it's been Phyllis. Our suggestion here, and the reason that we split it out, is that there are some functions there that more appropriately belong with Mr. Nilles. And so when that comes due, and it doesn't change at this juncture just because the title changes here, but next year we'll probably come forward and say, when it comes time for all of us to receive our reappointments, I'm going to suggest that Mr. Nilles be appointed the town treasurer, including the duties that go with that. That doesn't change reporting relationships, levels of compensation, anything else. And likewise, if the board wanted to turn around and say, I'm going to appoint Mr. Chu to be the treasurer, oh well.
Or the town manager could be the treasurer as well?
Could be, yeah.
Okay. And
Those positions are called out, required by statute. And as a statutory community, we're obligated to have those positions filled. They don't have to be individual positions, they can be overlapping. And Phyllis has served in an overlapping capacity, or the clerk has served in an overlapping capacity for more than recent memory.
The next comment or question then is down to 2-3-50 under town treasurer. Right at the beginning, we talk about town treasurer or designee. So where do we get a designee from for a town treasurer?
That would be up to the town treasurer to designate someone. I think this is because this duty in particular, we want to allow the town treasurer to have staff to do this. So that's a comment, or designee is often used if we want to allow whoever the official is to use staff to perform a particular function.
Because we don't talk about designee for anybody else.
You're right. This was a particular item in your code that was specifically allowed for a designee to perform. That is entirely up to you whether you'd rather have the town treasurer perform it.
Fair enough. Next thing I had was going on to Article 2-430B. We talk about talks about contempt power, and then it talks about indirect contempt, and I was just wondering what that is.
I'm not really sure. I have no idea. Now that you bring it up.
And, there's some rights that somebody charged with that is that somebody...
You're right. They have a right to a jury trial, which I'm not quite sure why you would have. I mean, it's a criminal offense. And then if it were any criminal offense, then you would have a right to a jury trial.
I'm assuming direct contempt is too.
Exactly. I'm not quite sure. That was already in there, but you're right. That needs to be fixed.
Okay.
I'll find out what... I don't think there is a difference between direct and indirect contempt, honestly. I think it's contempt if it's contempt, but I'll check on that.
Okay. Next thing goes to Planning Commission, and there's, at least the way I read it, some disconnects here.
I'm sorry, where are you at?
Now Article 6.
2610.
Starting with 2620A. I know this is not a change, but I just want to throw out there, maybe we want to talk about whether we should have 2 at-large members that may be elected to the planning commission.
It's just one more.
So that's 2 elected officials on the planning commission. But then the next part is in B, there's kind of an inconsistency in terminology. We say the town will have 1 appointed official in A, and then we talk about town clerk or other administrator. I think what you mean in term of the appointed official.
Yes, you're right. Yep.
There. And then going down to 2630, gets back to, I think this is where I'm still having this inconsistency of whether there should be any elected officials, whether there should be 2, or does 2-6-30 then limit it to 1, where it talks about no other municipal office except that 1 such appointed member may be a member of the Board of Adjustment, which is one of the town trustees, who's an elected official, but then it can only be 1 trustee. And what other elected officials do we have? I guess the mayor could be a separate elected official. So there's some inconsistencies I see there between 1 or 2, or whether, then as a board, whether we think there should be any elected officials.
Yes, you're
And I just throw that out there, I kind of think no. Okay, that's comments on that. Let me see if I had anything else.
Up to you all, but if you want to discuss and determine how you want to structure the planning commission, now, I mean, at some point, it might be a good discussion to have, because we can fix, obviously, this however the board so
Okay,
desires.
let me throw out my last comment then. This is still on Planning Commission, and this is 2-6-60D. We talked about the wording of the first part regarding public improvement projects, referred to it by the board, and we talked about a mechanism for how we tickle to do that, so maybe that's okay, the way that's worded. But my question, that really probably is more on your lap than not, is must they have a public hearing to consider these things, or can it just be one of their items that they consider in a public meeting and give advice or recommendations to us?
Either one, it's entirely up to the board.
Because I think a public hearing is kind of overkill for,
If that's your decision,
My
we could
personal-
certainly just say consider it at a public meeting.
I think that's better.
And all their meetings are public meetings, so.
Right.
that's my suggestion on that public meeting. Or take out the language about public hearing.
Or just may conduct, right? I mean,
No, they wouldn't may conduct a public hearing, they either do or they don't, I think.
And my only...
Is that
my
a
only
call
reason-
out in the agenda? Is that what you mean by a
No,
public?
public hearing is a special kind of meeting that has
Public notice.
public notice and a special procedure that follows, that you open and
There's
close it.
expense and time associated with it.
So you're
Let me-
suggesting they never have a,
I'm suggesting they don't need to have public hearings to give us advice. They have a public meeting and they give us recommendations based upon what's presented to them. Right.
And if
we
it's
have a
new-
public
and if this
hearing.
language doesn't mention it, then they have the choice of doing it or not doing
They
it.
always have a choice. If they want to have a public hearing on something, they can.
Okay.
And the new language, just to clarify, would read, "The Planning Commission shall review at a public meeting all public improvement projects referred to it by the Board of Trustees and make a recommendation to the Board of Trustees."
Exactly,
Okay.
right.
Or you could just get rid of conduct a public hearing. That's
It's
Whatever-
entirely up to
whatever
you.
you like.
I think you can just delete that.
Okay, that's fine.
So,
That's everything I had on this.
anything about those, because I think that we should talk about the planning commission in general. Do you want to talk about that? Or
I was just going to say, the
separate?
reason I pulled this one was the ambiguity I saw on that last comment as well, so you covered everything I had.
All right, thanks. So,
But we should talk about the planning commission structure.
so the planning commission structure, as it is right now, is that we have an appointed official, which Phyllis thankfully has been serving for a long time.
We don't have to get into those sort of details.
Decades.
That, I think that we've had an elected official on, you'll have to,
I served for a while as an elected
Yeah.
official. Prior to that, there hadn't been, but then prior to that, there had been. George Kuffner probably would know better. I've had raised to me that people thought it was a conflict. I don't think it's a conflict, but, and yet again, I attended a meeting at CML in which they suggested as much as, if not a conflict, you're getting information as a board member, unofficially, that you would not normally get it, outside the public hearing process.
So
There's an ongoing, just to give you a little back, dispute about this, because the Colorado statutes specifically allow for a trustee or board member or city council member to be on the planning commission of statutory cities and towns. But we always have this problem, because then you hear all of the information prior to your fellow board members. And so I know CML has had this ongoing discussion about how do we reconcile the two, and unfortunately there's not a great answer. But what many communities have done is simply said no elected officials on the planning commission.
So currently it's limited as two, that's what this is, so we're not calling a town board meeting, I suppose, as well, because our
Exactly.
publicizing it. The question is whether or not we haven't had the practice, except for in a few exceptions, and whether or not we should just remove that as part of the language.
My recommendation would be to remove it and get more viewpoints.
I agree. I think the exact same thing is that we get a chance to hear viewpoints of the elected officials at the board meeting, and the planning commission, I think, could be separate.
So we'd strike the language, it would just be no elected officials would be serving on the planning commission. I didn't look at it carefully.
That would then cause an adjustment to that other paragraph that talked about a member of the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah. On 2630.
Okay. Thanks for going through that in such detail, because I thought I read that, and I look at it again, and it's like, wow, I guess I didn't really read that.
So that proves I don't have a life.
Or that it's nice to have
life of retirement.
additional legal, not representation, but
No.
members of the legal profession on
Yeah,
the
I was
board.
gonna say,
So
you'd think he's either a lawyer or a planning commissioner member.
exactly one or the other.
Or maybe both.
And I was expecting you to come forward on this one. So
Okay.
you pulled through on that.
So anything else? You said that you were done with the stuff. That
I'm
you
done.
recommend. Anything else from the board? Town staff have any other thoughts about this? Okay, I think that I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary reading with those changes, because that's been our practice.
I'm so moved.
By Trustee Sorelli, second by Trustee Skomatz. Further discussion about that? All in favor? This is approval of preliminary reading, and this will come back at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Okay. Let's see, that brings us to item number, 6F, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Swingle Lawn, Tree, and Landscape Care for annual tree maintenance. Trustee Skomatz.
And I apologize that I didn't have a chance to ask these outside this session, but we had a work session, and yes. So I don't know what percent, it was great to see that we got all these different bids. That was a really good thing.
Yeah.
I had two comments. One was how much of the bid, or I guess I have a couple of comments. How much of the cost is winter watering? Was this first bid just completely, they didn't understand the scope of the project, or is winter watering, would that make up the difference in the bid? They just really didn't understand the scope? Okay. I've seen that happen. I just wondered, okay.
That was an affirmative nodding from the Director of
Yes.
Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Thank you.
And then another was the Green Plan group. You know, we have no information on these different groups. And one of the things I wondered was whether the Green Plan was a group that was proposing to do things like organic chemicals or whatever. That chemicals may not be the right word, but in any case, organic treatments.
I'd offer the opportunity for Director Dominguez to come in and chat with the board about this if you have any questions.
Just made her day.
That's what we're here for. And if it's possible that you don't have all the, we fully realize that when we do this on the spot and we haven't asked before the meeting, that you might not have the answer. So if you don't have the answer, it's fine to say, we don't have the answer.
We don't have the answer.
Okay.
Just real quickly, that wasn't one of the things that we were looking at.
And you are?
Juanita Dominguez, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. One of the things that we didn't look at specifically for this, bringing this forward.
And I guess that was a lead into, that might be something we might want to consider putting on the criteria for the next time we do this, because I think that's something that's just so much better for.
Sure, and just to let you know, last year we did try some organic fertilization, and it was very difficult.
Didn't perform? Right. Okay. Well, there are companies out there that are, using organics, but it's not really their central thing, and they may not be quite as well-versed or enthusiastic about it, those who really make it a core of their business practice. So we might look for recommendations from other communities that have done that successfully. Anyway, just a thought.
No, I think it's a good thought, and honestly, just along those lines, there's no reason that we couldn't chat with Swingle about it if they have, I assume that this will be a continued business development plan for many of these companies, green approaches to whatever, so, continued discussion with them, even for this contract, wouldn't be unreasonable.
Thank you for saying that. No, that's exactly where I was headed.
Okay.
I just have a question about fertilization. It said it's not included this year.
Winter.
Is that,
Yeah, we do not fertilize every year for our trees. We fertilize every other year.
okay.
year,
So this is just the off year?
Right.
Okay.
And I wanted
Trustee
to
Williams.
ask, sorry. I wanted to ask, how many trees have we lost to disease and insects in the last 2-3 years? Do you know?
I don't have a specific number, no.
No. Okay.
Big or small?
I mean, significant? Or?
We are saving a lot more of our trees than we are getting rid of at this time. Some of the practices that we've gone to since 2005 have really increased the opportunities for us to continue to help the trees that are suffering. We have continued to do some winter watering this winter. As you saw in the agreement, we're looking at some of the trees that are suffering over the winter and coming back, especially our pine trees. We think that it may be due to the lack of winter water. So that's one of the things that we've added to this agreement this year.
Trustee Skumas.
And the other question I had for both this one and the next one were just very related to that question about whether we're sort of replanting trees in places where other trees have died, and maybe there's something about that location, the sun, the soil, the something that means, quit beating a dead horse. It's not meant to be. But
Definitely part of the process that we go through is we track where trees are having a difficult time growing and analyze the soils, whether it be an area that has a lot of moisture and it just isn't a good place for a replacement tree, then we'll look at a tree replacement someplace else.
so we don't just keep hitting the same place.
Right.
Trustee Gregoris and Trustee Williams.
Is the biggest loss of trees due to the winds, though, rather than
Recently, yes.
it has been?
Within the last couple of years, yes.
Trustee
And
Williams.
I have a couple questions that kind of relate to G as well, but while I have it here, I'd rather ask now. As far as all these replacement of trees, how many of the replacement trees are actually new trees that aren't being replaced? They're
Enhancements.
Yeah.
If you look at the cover, we talk about 65-35%. 65% of the trees are replacement, 35 approximately are enhancements. And we try and keep that balance each year.
okay. And then who is insecticiding the new replacements of these trees? Is it CoCal or Swingle?
Swingle helps us with our IPS and our other insecticide treatments on our trees. Now, not all of our trees are treated either, so you have to understand, we have, over 6,000 trees within the community. I hope I was right. 4,500. A little exaggeration, I apologize, but over 4,500 trees within the town, and what we try to do is we hit the areas that are in the highest visibility areas.
Okay, so let me ask you another way. Does Swingle do all of our insecticide spraying, or does CoCal do that as well?
Trees, Swingle.
For trees. Trees for Swingle, okay.
Okay. Trustee Skumas.
My last question had to do with how are we doing in keeping trees living in medians? That seems to be a place where I just see so many brown trees. And do we have any plans for this year to?
Within the last couple of years, obviously since 2005, we noticed that there was a decline, especially in some of our pine trees. And we actually have taken quite a few out, and we have replaced those with some deciduous, which are better suited for medians and growth in medians. So that's kind of what we've been working with.
So I may just be seeing a few that are due for trade out soon. Okay.
Stumps to be removed and a replacement tree installed, that sort of thing.
Thanks.
And if it didn't survive, most likely a change in species, too.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Additional questions from the board? Any public comment about this issue? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion by trustee Skumatz.
I was going to make one more comment, sorry.
Oh, okay, trustee Williams?
I just wanted to make a note that I'm seeing 16 new trees being planted in Town 9. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm glad to see that.
Town 9, that's great.
Trustee Skumatz.
I'd like to introduce Town of Superior Resolution Number R-16, Series 2009, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement for professional services with Swingle Lawn, Tree, and Landscape Care for annual tree maintenance.
Motion by trustee Skumatz. Is there a second by trustee D'Souza? Further discussion? Phyllis?
Okay, Cirilli?
Yes.
D'Souza?
Yes.
Gregoris?
Yes.
Mucker?
Yes.
Skumatz?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you. With that, we're at G, adoption of a resolution approving the agreement with Cocal Landscape for annual tree replacement enhancements. Trustee Skumatz.
My question about this one I pulled it, my question got answered in the last question.
Further
And
dis-
I'm happy to second that.
Any other questions about this particular issue? Any public comment about this issue? Seeing none, trustee Skumatz.
Town of Superior Resolution Number R-17, Series 2009, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with Cocal Landscape for annual tree replacement and enhancement. So moved.
Motion by trustee Skumatz, second by trustee Gregoris. Further discussion? Phyllis?
D'Souza?
Yes.
Gregoris?
Yes.
Mucker?
Yes.
Skumatz?
Yes.
Williams?
Yes.
Cirilli?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Item number, I, adoption of a resolution approving an agreement with Superior Lacrosse Club for the use of synthetic field at Community Park. Trustee Skumatz?
Yes, the reason I raised this one was because I thought it might be, this was a good reminder to me to link back to the plan that we had when we ultimately approved the artificial turf field. We were given a sort of matrix of all the different clubs and all the variety of different sports that would be using it. And I thought this would be a good point at which to either ask for or get or something, a comparison of that sort of plan matrix with what's really happening and where there are gaps. So I'm not sure I can expect it as part of this item, but otherwise maybe it could be a follow-up item for staff.
Sure. Follow-up would be great. And Director Dominguez, maybe you
Any
could just
comments?
tell us generally how are we doing with programming the synthetic field? Has that been a success or not?
Very successful. As a matter of fact, this year, staff will be going through our fees for facilities as well as programs. And I don't mean to step on anybody's toes, but we'll be bringing some information forward during the budget process that may change some of the pricing structures, and that might be an appropriate time to bring that and the different users.
Okay.
And I guess my comment also comes from, we had said we'd have a variety of users, but we wouldn't be over-programming it or whatever as well, that it would be a field where people would be able to use it as well. And so that's not just everything programmed. So I'd be interested in seeing that back. Thanks.
Any further questions from the board?
Not knowing what the original assumptions or study might have shown, I'm guessing, and I'm going to, for clarity, comparison of the use of the facility, comparison of the dollar generation of the facility, both?
And the different sports, and that was one of the other things, that was going to be this whole variety of sports, not just the football folks.
Mustang football.
It was like
Not
a
to name a
programming
particular
matrix
Yeah.
that we had when it was approved.
But it was use.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, what types of things would be happening on the field.
Yeah, with that. Yeah, that's somewhere buried in my files. Trustee Skumatz?
So, if there are no other questions. I'd like to move resolution number R-19, Series 2009, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an agreement with the Superior Lacrosse Club Incorporated for use of the town's synthetic field at Community Park.
Motion by trustee Skumatz, second by trustee D'Souza. Further discussion about this? Phyllis?
This just shows that the field is not spending money.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, we're not spending money.
We're getting money from it, so I don't care.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you very much.
Just the assumption that we're...
Yeah, well, it had
Since we're
dollars
getting
attached,
money.
but we were getting it, not spending it, so, yeah. Item number 7, reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Williams, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Yes, I attended the Consortium of Cities Revenue Stabilization meeting on March 4th, and I found it very informative. I like the concept of revenue sharing among municipalities, although I think for it to be beneficial, it needs to be a positive financial gain for all parties, or at least break even. So I'm a firm believer that if we keep looking at it, we might find that. So that was my thoughts on that. As far as anything else?
Maybe I'll ask if Trustee Schoolmass has any.
And she also attended the meeting, and so did you?
Yes.
So if you have more?
Else and others, yes. I'm glad to hear you came out of it feeling like you learned a lot. I think it might really be great if we could get the consultant to come and talk to our entire town board, because we did contribute money for that project, and it would be, I think, nice to sort of close that loop. One of the things I thought was interesting, but not emphasized till the end of the meeting, and so anybody who couldn't stay through the whole thing, recognizing that, while Superior may have won or lost on some of the historical fittings, that those were all historical time periods, and that's when Superior was adding things and that sort of thing. That it really matters what's going to happen in the prospective period, and so just looking at whether we won or lost in the past isn't necessarily an indicator of whether we'll win or lose in the future, and that distinction probably wasn't emphasized well enough at the meeting to recognize that we need to construct what we see as scenarios in the future, and that will help figure out when or if or whatever, how we win or lose. I think one of the other points that you make is a really important one, in that we need to keep looking at it and see how we make it a positive or a agreement. And I think some of the things that also got raised in the meeting were maybe we do this at a time, especially that we also consider whether we start doing things like taxing services or doing something else like that helps increase the pie, so that you make this change at a point when it's a bigger pie and everybody does either stay home harmless or whatever. So yeah, it raises some really interesting issues, and I think it's such a huge problem that it really begs us to try to develop a solution. And waiting for a state solution, I think, feels hopeless. But if you can start it at a smaller level and grow it, I think it has some real legs.
Well, and I like the idea that it encourages not just city planning, but regional planning, so that you're not putting, Walmart here and 2 miles down the road, there's Kmart. You don't need that, and it would be better planning.
I think so too. And the developers wouldn't be the elements who'd be out of it all.
Well, I really enjoyed the meeting as well. I couldn't stay for all of it. That was interesting. Unfortunately, the retrospective review looked painful for the town of Superior, losing $500,000 to $1 million a year. But it is a prospective arena that we need to be most concerned about. And I think it supports the mayor's thought about forming Superiorville, and that would be one way to do revenue sharing. So we're not going there, but sort of my sort of like November elections, and this would be my other one. So thank you. Trustee Williams, anything else?
I'm done with my reports. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or issues?
No, not at this time.
Trustee Gregorus?
I think the only issue I'd like to bring, since we have a little bit of time, is go over the message board.
I have that listed for the manager to do tomorrow's report. We could do it now if you like, or do you want to do it now? That's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
You're calling.
You
it
received all the
monument
information.
sign.
There's obviously
Yeah, I had
derivatives.
information on that. I missed.
It would be interesting to know, first and foremost, is this an improvement, since it's an unbudgeted item, is this an improvement that the board is interested in seeing pursued in the current fiscal year? The order of magnitude, based on the only one vendor that we've spoken to, was between $35,000 and $45,000. We believe wholeheartedly, very strongly, that the electronic message board is the way to go, rather than the manual replacement. Significantly cheaper, but when you consider that it's going to be there for a generation or longer, that the cost savings over the life cycle will be significantly less with the electronic.
And safer for our firefighters, so that they don't have to be up on something and then get called in the middle of traffic.
I mean, I would wholeheartedly support that. As we were talked about earlier on this year, to communicate better with the town. What better way than to do that?
Yeah.
They can know what's going on, not how much information you can put on there, how often it recycles. As people are-
As frequently, as quickly as we want it to run. It could be a constant message board. It can sit there for uninterrupted, or it could just be almost like the bottom of a scrolling screen. You notice that with these letter sizes, we're going to be having visibility from 300 feet, 100
that's
yards
great.
away, which is, with the lines of sight, you're coming down the hill at 300 feet, you haven't reached the base yet, and
You can
just
read it.
past the Conoco. So it's not like, what was that? You have an opportunity to see it.
See, I would be in support of that, and the price seems,
Well,
reasonable to me.
There was only one vendor, though, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, we need to
get
get
it if
some more.
there's
Yeah, we
interest
got
in
a bit.
pursuing
Yeah.
it.
I'd like to see the scaled down, not necessarily in size, but in price. And I think the Town of Superior Town Hall is way too much of the focus. If we're really trying to use this as a message board, I think the message board, it should be flip-flopped. The message board should be the biggest thing on there, and the Town of Superior should be minimal. I mean, we already have a Town of Superior Town Hall sign out here.
It's gone.
It's gone?
That's where this goes.
That's what that would be then.
Okay, well then,
I mean, we can reduce the
You
size.
retract that.
I don't like the 40 grand, to be honest. I don't like that. I think that's just too much.
You're going to be that order of magnitude if it has the electronic message component. Now, we dealt with this when we dealt with the entry sign. I mean, we can scale back on the price tag if we do away with some of the ornamentation. You'll remember we had one of the designs we looked at in the entry monuments. We went the very simple stone monument. We had some with pillars, very similar to the marketplace. This is attempting to take in architectural elements associated with this building, the brick, the wood face sign, those kinds of things, the lettering. We can reduce its size. I was more concerned about its height than.
And I like
Then it's
option E,
price.
by the way, just on the record.
But
We heard that.
I saw this, Trustee D'Souza. Two
Trustee Scruggs.
Well, and I guess from my point of view, I would like to, I would prefer to see it match the look of the entry signs, that style, not a new style yet for this. I think that should be our sort of,
Standard.
yeah, as much as possible. I would use that as the base, sort of, from which we riff, to get, I think we should have a look for Superior, and this doesn't seem to be in that same family. I also, while I'd like to see the message board fairly large, I don't want it to be so large that we end up then looking like just an advertisement, like a mall or something like that. And so that's what I fear about having it get much bigger. And I do think, I frankly wouldn't mind seeing the words Town Hall be bigger than the Town of Superior. I think otherwise people drive by and say, oh, a house, or, it just doesn't look like Town Hall unless you've got a sign that says Town Hall. When I'm explaining to people where it is, I have to say the one that looks like a house that's, whatever. And so a sign that has the big words Town Hall bigger than this wouldn't upset me. I assume that are we talking about red letters? I mean, is it red LEDs or something? So it has the chance to look like sort of how much does it cost for gas and stuff like that next door. And
best example, the local example, and I was concerned about the message size and being able to read it from a certain distance, recognizing the traffic is moving at a higher rate of speed on McCaslin. Never more than 45, but
never. Yes.
That's what you think.
The best example is the Monarch school sign. It scrolls, but in terms of the visible space, the 18 inches, this is substantially wider at roughly 8 feet long, or 8 feet wide. But to try to put it in perspective, that's how much message space you're getting.
And I'm actually arguing for. I think 40K. I thought that was actually not bad because I thought our monument signs cost
13.
Okay, 13. So this has message and the rest of that stuff as well.
It's the electronic.
So it seems like a pretty good deal to me. I was actually wondering how much it costs to get, the color that looks like a TV or something instead. So that I was actually going the other direction. I wasn't going cheaper. I was going maybe more to get better communication and better look as opposed to what looks like a gas station.
The Jumbotron.
Not in terms of its size, but in terms of its capabilities.
We could rent space from Broomfield.
I was going to say, we could
That's a great idea.
The event center, that's...
Trustee
Welcome
D'Souza.
Superior.
I was just wondering also about the frequency that these break down, being electronic and outdoors? What's the, and maintenance type questions on that? Yeah.
We'll learn more as we go out to bid
Okay.
as to what the warranties are and the like. I have had them in other communities, installed them in other communities. They're certainly not maintenance-free.
Right.
But you weren't reinvesting comparable sums, you weren't investing significant sums. But it would be like your lights are going to burn out, and
Right.
there might be some computer programming that goes into it. Certainly, we're going to have the ability to do all the necessary graphics and content
Right.
in-house.
Right.
That's not a big cost factor.
I'm actually excited to get this. This is great.
Yeah, I think it's something I'd like to look into more and find out. I mean, we did several years ago try putting, we had rented those construction signs, the construction road ones, and, anything to try and let people know. I think that was during the
believe-
People showed up.
town center, yeah, so.
I think you did it for the winter snow problems that you had in the winter of '06. I know we did it during the summer of '07 when we had storm damage, talking about the special locations where we had dumpsters for
Oh, right,
Yard waste.
yard waste,
Yeah.
storm debris.
right.
I mean, there's so many things we can communicate through that. Even at a moment's notice, if you can do it in-house, you can type anything in the
Like, it's too
significant.
windy, don't put your trash out today. Right.
Planning Commission tonight.
Yeah,
Water
we
main
can have-
break
we can
at
think about
such
the
and such.
possibilities, actually.
Such a street closed.
Trustee
The
Skumatz.
question, this is one other thing to be looking into when you're getting bids. I have no idea of I just see the potential for people to hack into these and make it say things that you don't want to say. So if you could just have them
There'll
let
be
us know what
security.
kind of protections there are for that sort of thing.
Hopefully less than when you got the
Yeah, that's true.
manable boards or some of the vandalism we've had over at the summit at Rock Creek. Where convenient letter removal.
Yes, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that, entertaining public comment about this, but I think there's general, we're not going to vote on this
No.
tonight, but I think there's general interest in pursuing this with some
More
changes in
information.
architecture, possibly.
And price.
And we can certainly look at price
Low
as
end to
possible.
high end.
Exactly. The
can make it
150
more
trustee schools. And then,
Okay.
just some details.
And I go back to the budget constraints. This is the second hit, if you will, in the contingency account. The first was the library contribution for this year over and above what was budgeted. This is the second. We're 2.5 months into the year. But that's why we have a contingency for unanticipated items that come up after the budget.
And Mr. Randall, can we afford this somewhere within our budget, would you say?
Yeah, that's the key question, actually.
We'll make it
Too long to answer.
We will make it work.
We'll make it work.
And I don't want to leave the impression, I don't want to leave the impression I'm looking for this really huge thing, but if the increment for something that looks a lot nicer and it has more flexible is really small, then I want to know that. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Right. Public comment, and if you wouldn't mind at the mic. Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
Needless, do I have to identify?
Yeah.
Sandy
Wouldn't mind,
Pennington, 3002 Micah Court. I'm all for transparency, I'm all for publicity, but that particular segment of the road coming off 36 is very hazardous as that merges into McCaslin. And so I just want to put on the record public safety, because anything that distracts your attention off to the right could well contribute to accidents. So just wanted to put that out there.
Great. Good comment. Trustee Skumatz?
And it sounded like the visibility started after the whole merge is going off into Marketplace, is that right?
It should. You're supposed to
That's
be.
the big problem.
You're supposed to be. There's 3 lanes in front of Town Hall. The outer lane, the right-hand lane, is a merge from Coal Creek. If you're coming out of Conoco,
Yeah,
you're
Coal-
coming out of the Marketplace, or you're coming off of 36, you're supposed to be in the 2 left lanes before you get to Coal Creek.
Yeah.
Does everybody do it?
Well, there's a solid line there, so I'm sure they do.
There you go.
For the same reason that nobody's ever going by more than 45 miles an hour. You're right.
All right. So I think that we
I'm
have
done.
direction.
Any
Trustee
other-
Greco, anything else? Trustee D'Souza?
I attended the DRCOG, the retreat in Colorado Springs, and there was a lot of good information about what staff can and do for local governments, but also, if anyone's interested in finding more of that, they have a really thick packet that you can look at to find out. They're also for aging and for Regional Transportation Authority, and it's something new with the firefighters. And I think it's the training now that Dr. Cog has taken over.
The regional training.
The regional training thing and stuff. So anyway, there's a lot of information on what they do in that if anyone wants to look at that. The biggest thing was that with the recovery, the Federal Recovery Act, Dr. Cog is responsible for sort of divvying up where those funds go. And like Senator Gibbs just said, we're $500 million at minimum short. And again, that's per year. That's not even the total number. That's per year. So one of the things, there were a couple of projects, and this was the 36 queue jumps, so that the buses don't have to pull off with the rest of the traffic, that they can have a quicker way down town. And that was one of the projects that didn't get into what we approved. And one of the reasons was there was this guy from Louisville, Bob Muckle. And
Darn him.
Yeah. Might be able to have some influence with him. I don't know. But
Didn't work too well with the library, but...
one of the things that he did point out is that, he was trying to think regionally. There's a lot of areas that need the funding, and the biggest thing was the Denver Union Station, because it takes one of the largest chunks, and if we're really trying to do something that's going to affect all the regions and public transportation, things will all come down there. So in some ways that will benefit everyone. So, and the other thing that I guess you could call along our corridor was that we did get in Broomfield at the Park and Ride there, where 128th and 36th meet, that there's that was listed for improvements, and that one did get in that packet. But the one thing that the board strongly encouraged was that CDOT, they have something called SWAP funds. So basically the money that they're going to use from the federal government for these projects that were already on the books, the money that they had originally planned to use for that, they'll now come up with new projects. And so I think it was a general consensus from most of Dr. Cog that the queue jumps for 36 would be, we would recommend that Dr. Cog use that SWAP money for that. So.
And I think I heard that the RTD is having a finance committee meeting. That is talking about queue jumps again, so I think it might be coming back around. So
they were, and I think actually it was, last week that they had that. I think it was the day after our meeting or something like that. So.
Yeah, although I got another email today about that, so I think there might be. It's hard to keep track of what RTD is doing, but.
So.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, still hope.
Any issues or anything?
Oh, I guess the only thing that, because this is coming up a lot about the paving, I think we heard on the 2nd Street area, is that paving started, is supposed to commence?
It's done.
It's done.
I drove it this afternoon. They're still doing restoration work behind the curb, not sodding, but I don't know that they're getting ready to seed at this temperature, but they're certainly doing all of the access getting up to the old rail bed is significantly improved. The ledge that has been created by the access to the regional trail is beautiful.
Good.
I thought it looked incredibly nice. It'll look nicer when everything is green up to the pavement.
Okay.
But,
so that
even the parking areas that have been created behind the curb, which is the vast majority of the west side of 2nd.
Right.
Are all gravelled in, well manicured, looks very sharp.
I had the opportunity to drive it today as well, and I thought it actually looked quite good. And
As did I.
That was a successful
Part of not
project.
having a life.
So I'm sure,
Contributing to traffic problems on the bridge.
I'm sure that we'll hear some alternate viewpoints on that, but personally, I think it was a successful project. So, Trustee Skumatz?
Yes, it's me. Okay. In addition to the revenue stabilization meeting, I also attended a meeting of the CML Executive Committee, and on the legislative issues, I don't think we approved anything different from what the town's preferences were for the laundry list of legislation that was up and out and whatever. Glad I don't do that full time. Oh my gosh. Anyway, the next was Also, the CML has put together a repeat of last year's essay contest, If I Were Mayor, for students, and I think it's junior high age, but I can't recall for sure. But it was actually a pretty successful thing last year, and I will provide the information to town, and maybe it can go on Channel 8 or something like that, and solicit some.
When does it due?
They moved it to a month later than it was originally
Great.
because it was falling in the middle of whatever tests they have to have.
Oh, CSAP.
There you go, CSAP. So it's a month later than CSAPs, I believe.
So we should
And-
put it in the newsletter if we have time
Newsletter
to
or
do that.
something. That would be great. And the third, and I thought most exciting thing, I am not a touchy-feely person. I don't know if anybody's really noticed that, but I'm kind of just a facts man person. But CML has put together a bit of an advertising thing that towns and cities can use. And what it has is very simple line drawings of various things, like a flower or like a badge or things like that. And it says, "We plant the flowers," and that's in a colored background, or we protect the public, or whatever. And it's just meant to give citizens the message that those flowers don't just happen out of nowhere. They don't just the seeds don't appear out of nowhere and whatever. Just as a reminder to citizens what towns do and that sort of thing. And it's something where we can insert our logo, and it's free to us to use. And it was I'm going to say they had more than a dozen of these different messages, and they were nicely done, and they weren't hard sell. Apparently, some cities use things like, "Without the town, you could be whatever," that sort of thing. And this is much more low key, positive, and just sort of it floats in there and it floats out of there, and yes, I thought it was really effective, and for someone who doesn't get too excited about advertising, I thought it really worked well. So I think it was going to get announced maybe this week or released this week or something like that. And I would strongly suggest that we can put it in our newsletters, we can put it on our
Channel 8.
Channel 8, exactly, that sort of stuff. So I thought it would be great. So there you have it.
Great, thanks.
It's a good reading.
Trustee Cirilli.
Nothing.
See, I don't think I have anything to report. I had a couple of questions and or thoughts. So we talked about the Q jump and the signs. The issue, perhaps, the sign in the median over by 36, the new one with the PV, is it still under construction? Because there's like pipes and stuff all over the median there. Is that something occurring?
I believe it's the landscape restoration is yet to
Okay.
be done. Is there anything else?
Okay. Had an interesting.
Though it does look nice at night with the lighting on it.
Yeah, no, I'm fully supportive of it. I just wasn't sure what was happening.
It looks
So
like
it's
it's
maybe landscaping is yet to occur. All right. Had an email exchange with a resident about community gardens, and I think some other people have heard about that. I don't know if that's something that we would like ProStack to look at to see if that's something that the community would be interested in. If it is, then I'm not sure who our contact. Do we have a board contact person with
I'm not
With ProStack.
ProStack?
Right here.
Maybe you could communicate with them about some interest in that.
Maybe back here.
Yeah, wherever, they could look around. Either several areas have been floated.
I think the person that
Historical
suggested
Commission
it
over
was
here.
going to approach ProStack too, perhaps. but-
Yeah. So that would be good. And heard there was some interest in the Richmond side as well. I heard that as a possibility. So just think it'd be a good issue to discuss. I think the mayor would like some help from town staff about writing an economic development newsletter for his next newsletter article. We had some interesting exchange about that, and shop locally might be helpful. So, and then the board needs to make a decision about whether or not we want to spend time and money about 76th Street visioning issues. That was also brought up earlier. I don't know if people feel comfortable about making a decision about that right now, but it needs to be. We need to take some action, probably, if that's in interest of the board. So.
Would this be a comp plan change, or just general?
It depends.
If it's different, it would
Okay.
require a change. So, could we put that on? I don't think we need to do that immediately, unless I'm aware of anything new occurring down in 76th Street. So, can you put that on maybe an
Future
agenda
workshop?
workshop? That would be great. And I believe that's all I had. Mr. Randall.
A couple of items. First, if you've all received your community newsletter, a new feature was the annual report. We've done an annual report before, but candidly, it's never done a retrospective of what we've done over the course of the last year. It's been very statistical. The dollar bill and where the town's budget goes, information about our population and census information and the like. This was an effort to try to say, these were the goals that the board established last year, and here's what we did. If you actually read the content, it was very similar to a report that the board saw back in December, but thought it was helpful to sharing it with the community and then tying the goals in, and here's what we plan on accomplishing next year. So I would anticipate if the feedback from the board is good, that it's the kind of feature that we would continue to do in the future. Couple
It was
of
very
items.
well written, I have to say. I liked it.
I'll share that with people that actually wrote it.
Oh.
A couple of items. You already touched on the original town paving. We did say that we thought it was going to get closed out yet this week. The paving was completed last week. I did share with you the information, the most recent information that we had received from the Ridge, about the Ridge and their garbage services, and the resolution that we were successful in obtaining, including the fact that we do have the right to do it. They're going to come under our contract. We're going to waive the penalties that we were threatening to impose upon the vendor for the month that we were arm wrestling over this. And I included something in the most recent digest about the Boulder County Open Space, Parks and Open Space project, where they're looking for elected officials to volunteer for a day. So if you could get me, if there's interest in, and if any of those days work better than others, one, let me know if you're interested or not, and two, if you are, which of those days you might be interested in.
That's actually the one I've been pushing for a while, and there's a survey you were supposed to respond to.
Yeah,
Only two
wasn't
people
it?
from
Some of
Superior
us
responded.
responded to that
So,
already.
yeah. So, 2 or 3. So you should respond to that link, and I'm happy to mail it out again. Sorry.
The SurveyMonkey link about picking the best dates.
Yep.
Are you interested?
Remember.
Yeah, if the date's right.
We want to avoid things like the mayor being the only mayor running in the mayor's marathon.
You know, it was fun, though.
I
We talked about.
I didn't get that link,
I'll send
but
it
I can
again.
tell you right now, I'm in, and all 3 dates are great.
Great.
Okay.
Well, I'm not informed.
All right. Well,
We did share with the board some information about both December sales tax, which is a question that came up earlier this evening, as well as how the general fund fared for the year, which I think is exceptional news, especially in the current economic climate. But in fiscal year 08, we originally budgeted a surplus of $9,000. When we did the budget and submitted the budget to the board in August, we estimated that we would end the year with a $90,000 surplus. And we actually ended the year with a $173,000 surplus, despite the fact that sales taxes didn't reach where we thought they were going to reach. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, as we've shared with you on a monthly basis, the trends don't look good. We were 2.5% of the prior year, maybe in August or September, and we started to decline on it, and we actually had a couple of months that were below the year before. And as I mentioned at one of the citizen comments earlier this evening, we ended the year at just under 1% above the prior year. We budgeted a 3.77% increase in 09 over 08. So recognizing that we're trending poorly, we are starting to work on what I would describe as a contingency budget, a list of potential cuts and deferrals in anticipation that if revenues don't reach the levels that we expect, we don't want to be able to react to them. We want to be prepared to respond to them in advance rather than just, we missed it. The last thing I want to do is end the year in the red. So I want you to know that we're working on that diligently. I would expect in the next couple of weeks we will have a report for the board to say here are the things that staff are recommending, be first on the chopping block, and recognizing that, again, those may be cuts, they may be deferrals, capital project deferrals. I am purposely avoiding looking at the revenue side at this juncture. At this juncture, I'm not in the position of recommending any staff cuts or layoffs, though there are some things that affect personnel services. It's painful, but it wouldn't cause any bleeding.
And we're not looking at double digits like some of our neighbors.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah.
In fact, what
We're looking really pretty good.
what I'm looking at now, based on the recent trending, is what happens if we don't achieve any growth in sales tax, knowing that we budgeted 3.77. that would make a change of about $400,000 to the town's general fund, and how would we respond to that? So those are the orders of magnitude. Conversely, and granted, they might have bigger budgets, but we've heard that the City of Broomfield has recently done a couple of cuts, upwards of $6 million each. I believe the City of Boulder has done a $1.8 million cut each on at least 2 different occasions. And again, we recognize we're in the month of March.
Interestingly, Boulder's looking at cutting library. Yeah.
Nice.
At least medals.
Then the last thing I had was a review of your next agenda, recognizing that there are 5 weeks between meetings, second meeting of this month, and because there are 5 Mondays in the month of March. It is our anticipation that your next agenda will include the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Louisville on library services. We received last week the first draft of that agreement. I immediately, comparative purposes, almost immediately responded with some issues and concerns. I do have a question. I would like to clarify or confirm that the board is not interested in locking in post-referendum future property tax for a fixed extended term. We received a proposal from the City of Louisville that said that assuming that we go to referendum in April of 2010 and it passes, that the town of Superior would commit those revenues for a 10-year term. That was never any of our discussions.
No, he said we did.
In fact, we wanted the flexibility.
That's
so
right.
I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. I talked to Andrew about that, but I wanted to make sure with everybody that there's no intention here that we're locking ourselves in for a multi-year contractual agreement.
No.
The response was it's an annual basis. If there's a desire to break the agreement, there'd be a notice provision. You know, the rest of the stuff about representation on the library board and all those other things in there, but that was just the one that jumped off the page. So we'll continue to work on it, but I expect we'll bring it to closure and have it ready for you at your next meeting. The second reading of Chapter 2, based on the changes that you gave us this evening. The first reading of Chapter 7, which deals with health, sanitation, and animals. The only significance there is we talked about code enforcement last September or October, and we made a number of suggestions, and the board gave us a lot of yays and some nays. This one will include the last of those code enforcement suggestions that the board gave us last fall. As we've been incorporating the comprehensive amendments to the codes, this will be the last one, and this one pertains to things like the right of entry and our authority to enter onto private property and things that we can't do, don't want to do. Bids for fence painting, bids for some waste services, and those are associated with spring cleanup, landscape waste, and porta potty rentals for many of our events, including those that you approved tonight with the HOA. I expect that we'll be in a position to make the changes to the charters, the original ordinances and resolutions for the commissions and committees that we've talked about over the course of the last couple of months. Would expect that we'll have the first round of contingency grants. I hope to be in a position that we'll be able to bring a purchase agreement for some real estate on some of the open space acquisitions that the board has given us guidance and direction on. Some of those seem to be coming to fruition, and I would think in the next 5 weeks we'll be in a position for one or more of those. The workshop items at this juncture include 2 things. First is the review of our financial and our reserve policies. This is an outgrowth of our budget review last year. Do we need an 80% fund balance in the general fund? Do we need to have a 50% fund balance in the SMID? Those kinds of things. And we've also had some guidance or direction at request from the board that said we'd like to see some information on the town's financial modeling so we have a greater appreciation on how all of this interrelates. If we raise water rates or we get a good sales tax year, can we reduce property taxes or vice versa? So you'll get some information from Mr. Nilles on the financial models we use. And the second is we expect to have a conceptual plan review from Remington Homes. Talk about a name from the past, but they're interested in resubmitting. Before they go through the formal application process, they're interested in submitting a new, significantly altered conceptual plan for a residential subdivision. And you'll be seeing that during the workshop session with the Planning Commission on your next meeting on April 13th.
Trustees Kumats.
Does Kay mean there'll be a finance committee meeting?
Sort of general policy direction from the board. Unless I guess the finance committee could meet and talk about it.
That's what I was wondering. Don't we usually?
When we talk about the budget. I mean, I don't think there's any set rules, so I mean, if you feel comfortable doing that, I'm sure that we could do that before the meeting or whatever.
It seems like it would make sense.
As I said, the financial modeling came out of the board retreat in September. The request to review existing policies on financial management and establishment of individual fund reserves came during the budget review. So, however the board wishes to proceed.
I think it would be great to have a finance committee on it as well.
We'll probably have time before April 13th to hold a meeting with the Finance Committee if they want to review this. So maybe you could send out an email and see if the general interest with that. Squeeze it in somewhere.
in those 5 weeks.
So.
Yeah. It also has to do with when it's ready. Versus it's not sitting on my desk
It's
waiting
ready
to
to
go.
be reviewed.
And this goes when we did the work program, when we established some benchmarks or deadlines in order to accomplish certain things. I think this was scheduled for April.
And it wouldn't have to, the report wouldn't have to be completed. It'd be just sort of a general review of where you're going with that.
And then just a reminder that you do have scheduled an off Monday night, a special workshop session for next Monday, March 16th. 2 items on that agenda at this juncture: pavement management, the 20-year CIP, the pavement management plan that was originally presented to the board with your supplemental budget materials last August, with a more detailed and thorough time to discuss how it came about. And the other one that has since come up, but I thought it would be appropriate and well linked with that, was since we just did receive the final design, 70% engineering for the Colton-McCaslin intersection improvements. And I'm told that it also includes fairly substantial detail about the trailhead. So that would be an opportunity as well on that agenda, which right now we're scheduling to start at 7.
Trustee Skumatz.
How long are you scheduling that meeting? Because I really thought that the pavement thing is a full meeting in itself. There's so many priorities and how the priorities are set and what the staging is and all that sort of stuff and the money involved. That I really thought that was going to be a pretty exhaustive meeting. How long are you scheduling this work session for? You said it starts at 7.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like one of these 1 hour things we're trying to cram in.
Oh, no. I mean, you have nothing else that night.
I'm just
but
confirming.
I haven't given thought to, and it doesn't make much difference what Phyllis and I put in terms of the times allotted on these things. The discussion goes as long as the discussion goes.
Okay. I just hate to have to revisit something multiple times because we don't give it the right amount of time in the first place, and I'm pretty sure that one's going to go long.
And why are we meeting at 7 and not 6?
There's no meeting afterwards.
Yeah, there's no board meeting.
I know that.
You could meet at 6.
Trustee Gregoris?
Well, I'm flying back from California that night, so I'm probably going to miss it.
Oh.
Might catch the latter part of it.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else for the manager?
No.
Anything else? I reminded myself of one thing in terms of our code review. It had to do with moving houses into town and whether or not we need to somewhere look at that in our codes. I'm not sure. It doesn't really tie into any of the things that we're talking about at the next meeting, but
It would probably tie into chapter 18 or 16.
18. Well, I mean, moving as in how we deal with moving houses into town.
yes.
We have one particular house that has moved into town.
And we've
Yes.
actually, it occurs on not a regular basis, but we've had several houses that have moved into town, and we probably should have a policy about how that actually occurs.
Yeah, we could do either 16 or 18. We're working on both of them right now.
My biggest experience was with the one that we actually moved, which was the
Yeah.
Nasty House.
That's one of them.
Right. So, I don't think there's any crisis at the moment, but it'd be good to have a
Well,
policy
we
for
are
our future.
redoing both those chapters anyway, so it's
Right.
a good time.
Okay. Town attorney?
We don't have anything.
Town clerk. All right. With that, we need to move on to item number 8, which is an executive session to consider purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of real, personal, or other property pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parent 4, parent A, and to consider personnel matters pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parent 4, parent F. Motion by trustee Skumas, second by trustee Williams. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, and we're in executive session. Thank you.